Well, my name is David Peck, and I am the host of Face to Face. It's a very popular podcast, and I'm sure you've never heard of it before. But if you haven't, I hope you'll at least do a quick search and check it out. We got lots of conversations there, like the one that's about to happen here right now. We're here to, I'm going to say, celebrate a new initiative, a new nonprofit. It's the ICSDP. Adam Sneyd is here with us. He's the founder of it. He's also a political scientist, and he's a professor at the University of Guelph. Adam, thanks for joining us. I was going to say on the show, but it's not really a show, is it? This is just a conversation about some things that really matter.
Absolutely, David. I mean, we've had an opportunity to speak a couple times in the past, but this, I think, is one of the more exciting times involving collaborations right in your wheelhouse, where you've been walking your whole life and talking the talk related to development challenges. Yep.
So tell me, what's the acronym stand for?
Well, we're calling it the Independent Commission on Sustainable Development Progress. So, the Independent Commission on Sustainable Development Progress is essentially an initiative to rethink and reinvent the wheel of sustainable development metrics at the global level. Because right now, as many of you are aware, there's a whole bunch of politics that's intervening on development. Like, look at what's happening south of the border in the United States right now, and the repudiation of the Sustainable Development Agenda. The United Nations is on the back foot at the moment, and the Secretary General is, on the record for now 2 years saying that the world is not on course to achieve the SDGs, and this is only getting worse as the politics has become more entrenched between nationalist voices pushing back against the global goals and progressives and kind of greener activists and researchers saying, well, hold on a second, are these objectives even aligned? Are they even necessarily going to get us to where we want to go?
Like, why even bother? Now, Adam, a little plug here: Hidden Politics in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Adam's written a new book. If you haven't picked it up, frankly, I'm a little disappointed in you. So please, I get it. It's from Fernwood? Yeah, Fernwood Publishing. I've read the book and I've interviewed Adam about it, and we've had a deep conversation on Face to Face. I hope you'll check that out. There's going to be more podcasts here on the site, so stay tuned for that. Adam, you take in the book, can I say, a hopefully cynical approach to the SDGs? Is that a fair way to describe it, with this question of why the SDGs and why do we need to rethink this now? Is your approach hopefully cynical?
I think it's a good way of putting it. Like, we're looking at a process in 2015 when the Sustainable Development Goals are agreed internationally, a diplomatic and negotiated process. And the challenge of a diplomatic and negotiated process is pretty straight up. You can't actually, get the politics out of that process. There's always some politics that's left inside there. There's a political consensus that has to be built. So if you've got 17 goals and a bunch of targets underneath each of those goals, of course the targets could be contradictory. Of course there could be challenges. So I'm not necessarily cynical. I'm being realistic about the challenge. And I think we might now know the nature of the problem enough to be able to suggest a viable solution to getting us out of this kind of a quagmire where we have metrics that don't necessarily match our ambitions to end poverty and assure health for all and all the rest of the list of the 17 goals.
So the ICSDP, is this for professionals only? Is this for political scientists, philosophers, social scientists, think tanks, and so on? Or is this for average folks who are reading their daily news? Are they going to be hearing about you?
It's for everybody. We have to create new metrics for sustainable development. There's no question at this point. If you go through every single one of the goals that have been articulated by the United Nations and you look at the content of those goals, you're going to find huge gaps between our aspirations to kind of feed the world, so ending hunger tomorrow, and the actual language that is being used to measure progress towards that kind of noble sounding objective. So I guess in our case, what we're proposing to do is to develop a rigorous apolitical reassessment of the Sustainable Development Goals, ensuring that global sustainability efforts are based on scientific evidence and the latest research and measurable outcomes and a clear roadmap for progress. And we just don't have that right now. So obviously that's going to have a big impact on people down the road. But yeah, we're proposing to basically put at the center of the global sustainable development effort research and science, which has been basically pushed to the side. We've had this negotiated diplomatic process that's kind of controlling goal setting, and I think we need to rethink that. So that's why the independent part of the independent commission is so important. We need to have the independence necessary for researchers, people who've been working that are noted experts in all of their fields across all the 17 goals, to come together in essentially like a hive mind environment where a commission and working groups can basically pursue the necessary changes to how we're thinking about sustainable development in order to reinvent what a post 2030 agenda would look like. So it's 2025. We think we're coming at this at the right time to actually say, okay, hold on, hit pause. The Secretary General said 2 years ago we're already off the rails, and maybe 2 or 3 goals at most are going to be met, and most of the targets and indicators for the SDGs will not be met. Most of the goals that have been articulated are nowhere near being met. Like look at the water goal and the sanitation goal. This is abysmal. So how do we actually get out of that quagmire? How do we move forward at a time when you've got this huge political conflict going on? I think it's about creating the hothouse environment. Essentially, we need the CERN for sustainable development. I think we know the nature of the problem. I think we have a mechanism here where we might be able to basically put that research at the center and see what comes out the other side, independently of all governments and international organizations.
Right. It's to try to take it out of that more can I say pejorative kind of political environment, that space that's not so maybe healthy, that's not so relational, that's not so nonpartisan, to say, okay, how do research and science actually get us to impact?
Absolutely. And I think that there's in almost all areas of the SDGs, this is exactly the remedy that we're going to be putting forward. I think we can have a clear impact right away on the no poverty goal if we start to take a look at all the other dimensions of poverty beyond income. I mean, in the SDGs themselves, we don't see a focus on capabilities, and this is Nobel Prize winning research that happened 20 to 30 years ago. Amartya Sen's work on capability deprivation, and it's almost nowhere to be found in SDG number 1 on no poverty. We don't have an emphasis on a lack of power. I mean, poverty is about not being empowered, and that isn't in there. And we're also seeing work on a lack of happiness. Obviously, that's part of poverty too. But we just have this overemphasis on the income dimension. So this is something that bringing people together who have kind of like-minded research, but also big-time scientific credentials to interact on this, I think will be very, very important.
Adam, where does lived experience come into this? So for me, research science clearly has to lead to impact, and it's got to get us there as international development practitioners, specialists, academics. We need to listen. We need to step into a context. Every context is so specific. I mean, that sounds like a truism. It sounds trite. It sounds like I haven't said a thing. But we seem to forget that very quickly. Right?
Absolutely.
That we have to listen. So where do, I don't know, communities of influence step into not only the ICSDP, but this conversation from, I don't know, let's go big, a greater good kind of perspective.
Okay, so what we're proposing here, with as much as it is an initiative that will bring researchers and scientists together to discuss basically all aspects of the SDGs and create working groups to try to rethink how we're assessing progress and what our targets should look like to assure that those targets aren't contradictory and loaded with politics and political terminology that's not defined, and creating new metrics and data points. This all sounds like an exercise that's oriented towards governments and international organizations. But the reality is, we want to create a political commission that is engaging at the country level. And a lot of the research collaboration that we envision under the ICSDP would essentially be bringing researchers to the community level with former politicians, potentially former heads of government or former heads of international organizations, country missions to engage communities with their experience with the Sustainable Development Goals over the last 10 years. So there's kind of an assessment and rethinking exercise. So if this was our way of approaching poverty under the SDGs, we're going to have researchers and scientists working in communities to actually take a look at what that meant in our old way of thinking about it, and then redeveloping new ways of thinking about progress on that basis. So I think community engagement is at the heart of this. Even though it'll be leading researchers with mandates to kind of identify current impediments to progress, identifying limitations of the current SDG targets and indicators, and suggesting alternative ways to direct and measure progress ultimately. So I think participation in this initiative, just like all independent commissions that have tried to fix international development issues in the past, it's essential. So there will be a lot of outreach. That's a huge component of our proposal.
Adam, is there a reason why, and maybe this is just me, and I try to triangulate my news. I read a lot of different, I read on a lot of different platforms. I try to go to a lot of different sources. I don't hear a lot about the SDGs. I think back in the day, we had the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, and we did hear about that. It was in the news, or at least it seemed to be. Do you think there's a political cynicism that's currently at large saying, you know what, let's just not talk about it because we kind of know they're not manageable. There's too many of them. It's going to be too hard, and we kind of showed that with the MDGs. But or is a better question? Did the MDGs at least show us that we needed to get to this place, to this point in history, if that makes sense?
Okay, so amongst people who are working in positions of government around the world at all levels, in civil society organizations that try to influence government policy, international organizations, there's massive buy-in to the idea of the Sustainable Development Goals. So in that community, whenever somebody from the United Nations that's close to the Secretary General, flies from New York and they say go to Manila, this is front page news in that country. Okay, we're talking
Right.
Sustainable Development Goals, and that's that country after country. The SDGs will be on the front page of a local national level newspaper, or they'll be making the news in that country on the nightly news broadcast. But in many global north countries, like in Canada right now, the Sustainable Development Goals are basically nowhere to be found in the media space. You can find them more likely. You're going to find a mention of it on your university webpage. Right. You're going to find it at the municipality. You're going to hear about it in some aspect of one of the ministries in Ottawa.
An NGO.
So it's not the current terms of kind of political debate. That being said, I think it's a really big deal in a lot of countries around the world. So there is a question here of how that can be squared. Obviously, sustainable development is something that has been thrown around since the 1980s, and the drive to achieve it has never put research at the heart of it. We've always been kind of stuck in these negotiated processes. Okay, we got to Rio, then we went to Rio plus 10, and then there was a whole delay under the MDGs to finally get to the SDGs, where the sustainable dimensions of development were brought together with the social, and that's really what the problem is here that we're trying to address, is that the social, sustainable, and economic aspects of the goals are just not aligned with each other in any way that cuts the politics out or gives us better data points. So ultimately, though, what we're talking about doing here is updating statistics for the 21st century to basically create new visualizations of how we measure progress and think about it. So, for example, the no hunger goal, there's a lot of discussion of stunting and wasting in data on malnourishment that's still utilized by people who are nutrition experts around the world and dietitians. But there was very little attempt to include targets or indicators under the SDGs that are related to malnutrition and the intersection with the food system. So the SDGs aren't tracking data related to ultra-processed foods. There are no indicators devoted to understanding the trends or prices of the accessibility of local leafy green vegetables, for example. There's nothing like that. So the SDGs are using older approaches to understanding malnutrition, and they aren't connecting those fundamentally to sustainability. So what we have to try to do with this initiative on that one, on SDG 2 and on malnutrition specifically, is to try to bring in the sustainability dimensions. It was like the first pass in 2015 of trying to integrate sustainability into how we understand the big challenges facing the world. And that pass was diplomatic, and it missed a whole bunch of stuff, and it still is loaded with political assumptions. Another example would be SDG 8 on growth and employment. The whole goal is driven by a political narrative about the greening of growth, and it isn't at all attentive to the science, the divides that have emerged over the necessity and viability of relying on exponential or compound growth indefinitely. Like our societies, we keep hearing growth, growth, growth. You go on social media, well, what's happening to growth? Well, there's a very real scientific divide on this topic right now, and ignoring that divide is a political choice. And I think if you put research and science at the heart of an initiative to change the way we think about development challenges, we can remedy some of these problems by bringing experts together across borders. And I can go on all these other SDGs, but it's really the case. I mean, if you go to the infrastructure goal, SDG 9, the whole thing is disconnected from ambitions related to sustainable production, to life on land and life underwater. I mean, there seems to be an advocacy almost for infrastructure
Right.
development projects in tropical rainforests, for example. SDG 10 on inequality doesn't focus on wealth inequality for some strange reason, but only on incomes. And of course, we've got a global conversation about wealth inequality right now. How can we better account for that? What kind of statistics can we use? What kind of goals can we set and targets related to inequality that actually address the nature of that problem? And here's the ultimate example, the worst indicator under the current sustainable development framework that I in my view, is corporate social responsibility. So the commitments companies make to doing good is being measured under the Sustainable Development Goals by the volume of reporting, corporate reporting on sustainability. So basically, the more corporate reporting there is on sustainability, the more that we think that things are going well for sustainability. It's like, well, hold on a second here. That seems like a kind of a circle. It might be virtuous, but most likely vicious, because if the reports are vacuous, there's you don't have any. There's nothing there,
virtuous,
right?
vacuous.
So
vicious.
I think we gotta think better.
So Adam, think better is great. I mean, that could be a tagline for, it seems to me, for the ICSDP. Mm-hmm. Would you say one of the goals here for this group, this independent commission, as it were, is about creating community around conversation that's going to, here's some more alliteration, that's going to lead to a call to action of various sorts, various kinds? I mean, this is about innovation, isn't it? This is about changing, not only just changing the conversation. We want to see those calls to action actually lead to impact.
Totally. We've had, I don't know how many academics independently and in groups, how many NGOs independently in groups have basically picked apart the problems of the sustainable development agenda as it currently exists. And at the moment, if we're actually trying to build something for the future, a world where sustainable development is guided by clear science-based frameworks, free from political bias, powered by collaborative and transformative action, ensuring lasting progress for both people and the planet. Once that's out there, once we have a framework that's out there, we don't know whether we can actually broker this to anybody at the government level, anybody in business, in civil society, until we actually have these metrics and can say, look, here's a different way of approaching this problem. Here's a 21st century way of approaching this problem. We think we've cut out the politics. We think we've got a direction here, possible indicators that you could use. Here's a whole suite of tools that you can use to better understand this problem that's at the intersection of the education system and food. Like right now, they're not measuring school feeding programs under the SDGs. There might be some school feeding programs that are used by governments to justify the Sustainable Development Goals, but the metrics that have been built into the Sustainable Development Goals don't actually say, indicator of progress. How many school feeding programs do you have, or how has the funding gone up over time? Simple stuff like this we can fix.
Yeah, so this idea of, and this is the philosopher in me for sure, and I suppose just the guy who's had a few conversations over the years. How do you remove political bias? How can you ever, Kierkegaard, the John de Cielo?
Oh my!
Right?
You're asking this to a political economist okay. So one of the best,
and I need your best answer in 32 seconds or less.
Okay.
How's that? Yeah.
Define your terms.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about empowerment without defining it? Why are we talking about sustainability without actually creating clauses? This is the worst aspect of humanity when it comes to development challenges. We have not been thinking about the terminology that we're using. We just verbatim reiterate the same stuff.
We're not even thinking clearly before the gate opens.
Yeah. So first thing I would do if I was sitting around a round table, 17 people from different disciplines, and we had 17 different working groups related to each of the SDGs, and okay, let's get the terminology thing on the table. For starters, before we even think about let's actually look at this common language, and let's go back to communities. Let's go back around the world and get this language right, so that we are actually working on the same page here. This is a task for researchers and scientists. This is also a task that's probably going to involve data analysis and data science, to the extent of maybe AI could play a role in this somewhere. So we're going to need a lot of help and support to make it happen. But that's the number one thing, is get the political bias out through just defining and being clear about what those definitions are. And we can do that as an independent process. If if you rely on a diplomatic process, you're never going to get this level of detail, and you're never actually going to be communicating, because that's an interest-based process. This isn't an interest-based process. This is a process that's dedicated to enabling us to liberate ourselves from underperforming systems of social accounting, economic accounting, and environmental sustainability accounting.
So I mean, this could be our for this conversation. And by the way, all of those who are listening and hopefully watching, there's going to be a series of these conversations around what's happening with and within the ICSDP. And I hope you'll stay tuned and stay informed. There's going to be a newsletter that you can sign up for, and it's ICSDP.org. You'll be hearing a lot about that over the next little while. Adam, this is. Oh yeah. How about another plug for Adam's new book, Hidden Politics, Fernwood Publishing. So listen, Adam, how do we, for a second here, just kind of make contact with reality and say, this is so not just an academic exercise. This is not just a metaphor of putting food on the table. This is about putting food on the table. This is about building capacity where capacity needs to be, where we need to come alongside others around the world. This is the real work, is it not?
From all over the world, we have knowledge accumulating and growing dusty that's related to exactly what you're on about. We have, study after study, not just by academics, by regular people. It's built into the fiction. It's built into, world, Nobel Prize winning books from the developing world and from the least developed countries. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we recognize that, okay, so it's a critical mass now. Right, we're at this point where there is a growing level of frustration. People who want to see change the sustainable development agenda, so that we can actually expedite a world where we're not, looking at 2100 staring us down, and we're going to need multiple more planets. We have to figure out our systems for measuring actual progress and not be hooked back on this 20th century metrics as I keep talking about. So right. I think this is a knowledge-based process. It's a process of conversation and collaboration, and we don't know what the uptake will be. We're going to broker it as hard as we can. I mean, this is basically humanity's shot to make what we do to the world better, recognizable to people in a common language, and to actually better capture what it is that we're doing and not doing to advance sustainability. This is something that it's just so strange that it hasn't happened as yet, when we have 40 years of scholarship and research and NGO reports and just like this litany of failure. Okay, so how do we build off of that, these failings that are known, and to actually create something that might help us to get over the edge and then can be utilized and consulted by people that want to take us in a totally different direction.
One of my favorite pieces, and I'm maybe on the next conversation we have, I can directly quote it, but Partners in Development, Lester Pearson, 1968. It sounds like we're having the same conversation almost that they were having, just kind of using different language and so on. So tell me a little bit more specifically about the ICSDP. It's the ICSDP.org. That's where the website is. What do you need right now as founder? I mean, other than, I'm going to assume some financial support, you're going to need members. And I know there's lots of people already that are a part of what's happening here collectively. I'm assuming we're looking forward to a conference of some kind down the road, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, the idea occurred to me coming out of the book project. Really, I was like, okay, so we've seen this just record of abysmal failure. We've got this problem here with the SDGs that not a lot of folks are necessarily ready to recognize as yet. If you've been drinking the Kool-Aid, if you've been eating out on the SDGs, if you've been part of global networks, and you think that things are, the work that you're doing is genuinely committed to remedying this problem or that problem, taking a step back and looking at the overall forest of the problem of the SDGs isn't necessarily your priority, but this is something that I wanted to put out there. So how do I make this a positive and hopeful outcome? Well, I think that, the idea of an independent commission is something that's been floated on a couple of occasions in the past to remedy crises. in international development. And this is a crisis. I mean, we know it. We're living through it. It's absolutely grotesque what we're seeing south of the border. Right now, this current moment is it's just so shocking. The destruction, putting through the wood chipper, the USAID, all of the work to defund organizations, it killed people, and it's. I mean, obviously, the United States International Development Agency has its own checkered record of development successes, and that's okay. But the reality is that we're seeing a big pushback against trying to build a better world, and that also is translating into this attack on universities. And what better time to bring university people together? So what I need is support to bring university people from around the world together in a hothouse environment to essentially revisit how the world is and is not, thinking properly and effectively about the challenge. So, in my case right now, what do I need? Well, I had a great couple of folks from my past and my current reality who've come to me and said, Adam, we love this idea. So, luckily, we've established a nonprofit organization, the Independent Commission on Sustainable Development Progress, with the assistance of Thierry Zumahun, who was the CEO of a couple major research and science initiatives in the African context, and CEO of Sky Canoe, Jason Dudek, has come on board as well to help us with establishing ourselves and chasing down funding to help us to bring people together. So we have some really strong support from others like you, David. I mean, just the fact that we're doing this thing, and folks who've helped me out over the years, who are into political communications, and researchers from around the world who've already expressed a significant amount of interest in this. So when I put it out on the website as just like a blog or of an idea, like here's how an independent commission might work, I actually said, if you don't want your name associated with this, just tell me to get stuffed and I'll scrub your name from the website. And basically nobody's done that as yet. So this is a good thing. I think we're ready to build. People are looking for something positive. How can we contribute right now? And honestly, like we can reinforce international cooperation through this initiative. Like you don't hear a lot about. I worry so much about what happened to the League of Nations in 1919. I look at there was what happened in the Second World War when there wasn't an international organization that was effective anymore. There was just nothing happening, and it just fell apart. And now, fast forward to today, and we have a UN that's completely on the back foot without any sort of effort globally, seemingly, to backstop multilateral cooperation that's in any way effective in the last 4 months since the inauguration in the United States. So we're looking at something here that could potentially serve as the basis for reinforcing international cooperation related to sustainable development. To actually, look, we did this independently of the system. This should help to at least backstop what's left of it and maybe help us to find new ways forward. Even if we don't have an effective United Nations system in the future, the Independent Commission on Sustainable Development Progress will produce the metrics that'll still be there that could be used by any willing, governments, individuals, civil society groups to advance their cause in relation to more sustainable practices.
No, that's great, Adam. Wow, I can tell you're kind of passionate about this and pretty committed, and I love that. And I think everyone I've met so far is in that same community. There's no question about it, including myself. So the ICSDP is an independent, this is right off the website, folks, is an independent and nonpartisan commission. It is an international intelligence and knowledge-based organization established to drive for transparency, accountability, and results in the global development agenda. The ICSDP.org. Adam, this is the beginning of many conversations we're going to have, I'm sure, one-on-one in groups and online. Thanks for joining us on this one here today.
Thanks so much, David, for having me.